everybody, it's Leeroy of Leeroy Gaming, and today we have coverage of a surprise dev blog post going over damage control. So we're going to be going everything about armor, resistances, shielding, how everything works. I will also be providing my personal feedback based on my experience with now over 500 hours with this game. So hopefully you guys find this nice and helpful because there is a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and jump right into it for your convenience. Remember, I do my best to provide timestamps in the description below as well. So um, let's take a look. Let's jump and take a look at right off the bat the index of what's going to be covered. They're going to talk about resistances, armor, shields, nodes, mods, and Phoenix mechanics. Phoenix meaning kind of save life, like the mechanics where you're about to die, but it saves you. Status effects, health regen, weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and then a hidden mechanics, death and spike damage prevention. So they released that even though they wanted to keep it secret originally. So I'm really stoked that they're covering that. So let's start with resistance. What does resistance protect from? Resistance is a mechanic that serves to protect the player character from incoming anomaly damage. In practice, this means all non-physical attacks by enemies. All enemy non-melee abilities and elemental attacks are counted as an anomaly. So the perfect example of such attacks are fire grenades from shotgunners. So very important, it says all enemy non-melee abilities. So just like with us, it looks like that their melee abilities are going to be physical here. So unlike us. So for us, our melee attacks are actually anomaly damage. It scales off anomaly, but here, that is a very important distinction. So for them, all enemy non-melee abilities and elemental attacks are counted as anomaly. So that is a distinction. And it says, what does resistance not protect from? Physical damage completely ignores resistance. Therefore, all physical attacks will bypass the stat, which kind of makes sense. That's why they want you to have a balance of the two. Now, how does resistance scale? This is important. Resistance reduces the incoming anomaly damage by a given percentage. So 30% resistance is 30% damage reduction. An endgame example, Broodmother uses Anomaly Eruption. It is an area denial ability that forces the character to move. A hit deals 36,000 anomaly damage on CT15. The player has 50% resistance. Basically, it blocks, equivalent of like roughly 18,000 of that. There's 30% is 30%. So it's very, very linear, which is really big. And does it have a cap? And resistance is capped at 85% incoming damage. So that is important to note because you can definitely have it show up as higher than that. But it's good to know that they did confirm the resistances do legally cap at 85%. Anything above that is just going to be a visual effect. But that's still, because it's just linear scaling, that's nice. And I'm assuming they did that because there's not as many sources of resistances in the game. Now, armor. What does armor protect from? Armor is a stat that serves to protect the player character from incoming physical damage. In general, this means all melee and ranged weapon attacks in the game. So basically bullets, for the most part, and melee attacks. Now, I know for a fact, okay, this is important, in some of the levels, there's these little range small alien creatures, and they like spit venom at you. That's a range attack, but I know from getting melted by them, surprisingly, those are definitely not physical damage. They definitely are anomaly damage. They're like venom spitters or something along those lines. You see them in Archway. That's a real popular place to find them, as well as other areas as well. But I know a lot of people run Archway. That's where you're going to see them more often than not. So very important. What does armor not protect from? Armor anomaly damage completely ignores armor. Therefore, all anomaly attacks will bypass the stat. Makes total sense. You'll see this, obviously, the yin and yang of armor and resistances. None of it is new so far, except for the scaling here. Armor value is used to determine how much physical damage should be reduced. It is compared and scaled according to armor reference value during calculation. Reference value is the expected armor value on a certain level, world tier, or a CT, challenge tier. At CT15, a Broodmother deals around 50k damage with a melee attack. If the player's armor is on par with the reference value, they have roughly 30% damage reduction. If the player armor is lower, damage reduction will be lower, vice versa for higher amounts and damage reduction. So it has relative scaling. This is why, depending on your CT level, your specific armor value may dramatically do less or more as far as helping you out. That's also why people that choose to have no armor mods and no armor skill notes to be full glass cannon, then they run a CT15 and they're wondering why they're getting destroyed. Because they're definitely not at this reference value they should be at. So they're doing less than 30% damage reduction. And guess what? 50k, let's say it's 20%. 20% of what 50k is what 10,000. They're getting hit for 40k. There's your one shot right there. Because chances are, because you, like probably almost everybody else, hates max health on their stats, so you probably don't have 40,000 health. I know I don't. So now, physical damage reduction displayed in your stat screen shows the physical damage reduction against the highest unlocked level enemies. So that is important. So you may, if you face a lower level enemy, you're gonna be tankier. This means that if you progress from one challenge tier to the next without adjusting your armor value, your physical damage reduction may display lower. Okay, so it's dynamic scaling visually. Does armor have any cap above which it has no further effect? Armor does not have an upper cap, but physical damage reduction derived from armor is kept at 85%. So this is why some people say, I'm running around with, 500,000 armor. Well, it doesn't matter. You've hit diminishing returns and you've hit the cap of 85%. So this might confuse some people in the wording. All you need to know is both armor, both physical defense and the AP or resistance are both capped at 85%. You will always take a minimum of 15% of both when it comes to armor and resistances. That's your TLDR. Shields. What does shield protect from? Both types of damage are blocked by the shield. That is huge. So it's both physical as well as AP damage. And that is very, very important because some people will have shields or they'll go a full shield build and they may not run very much resistance. So this helps with that. If the damage is anomaly based, the damage the shield takes will be based on resistance stat calculated explained above. If the damage is physical based, it will be used armor value. Now, kind of going forward though, even though it protects from both, which is good, the downside is it still looks like it scales. So if you have low resistance, it's still going to protect you. It's not like shields don't get bypassed. So remember, armor gets bypassed by AP, resistance gets bypassed by physical 100%. None of this gets bypassed, so it's always going to help you. But if you have really low physical resistance, basically very low armor or very low resistance, then your shields aren't going to be nearly as effective. This also means if you have both high physical and resistance ratings and you have shieldings, you're going to become really, really tanky. It's like having higher effective health. How does shielding work? Best way to describe how shield works would be to treat it as an additional health bar, as I just kind of mentioned, which absorbs all damage first until it's depleted, and only then damage reduced from the actual health points. Shields should behave exactly like hit point bar, except that they will deteriorate over time. It will also deteriorate faster when out of combat. So it's like a weaker version of effective health. The maximum amount of shield is equal to your maximum amount of HP. That's important. No, they never stated that before. And there was no numerical value. So this does mean if you have higher HP, you can have higher shielding. Increasing your HP will also increase your max amount of shielding. Important. Shield gains are always based on percentages. Boosting your HP can have a significant impact on your shield values. No, last week's changes to health granted by armor should therefore also have boosted the max amount of shields in a similar way. So the ultimate tank build would be, interestingly enough, probably a Trickster then that has high armor and high resistances and therefore really high shields. Go figure. So that's important to note. Does shield offer any additional protection? Shields prevent characters from being affected by knockbacks and interrupts. That is huge. I never really knew that. The Trickster shield has an additional 5% extra damage reduction that reduces final damage taken. This is a unique effect to this class, and no other class benefits from this. This, I believe, means you can have an effective maximum damage reduction of 90%, roughly equivalent. So, again, newsflash, boys, Tricksters equals potentially ultimate tanks in the game, question mark. Damage reduction nodes and mods. Some skill tree nodes and gear mods provide an effect that reduces incoming damage from enemy type by percentage. Enemy types mean a certain enemy class here, for example, elites. And I believe that's the only ones we've seen. I haven't seen anything else other than elites. The final damage calculation step is multiplying damage through modifiers, and one of them is damage reduction. For example, reduces incoming damage from brood mothers by 30. There's no such thing as brood mothers in this game. I mean, I know they're brood mothers, but there's no like lowers damage by brood mothers. It's just elites. I know what they're talking about here. Will reduce final damage taken by brood mothers by 30%. Okay, except just erase brood mothers in your mind because this is going to confuse you. Just imagine elites. This person is a little confused. Phoenix mechanics, or maybe I'm confused and you guys have found some loot that I've never found over 500 hours. Who knows? All right, Phoenix mechanic. These are optional mechanics that allow players to ignore death the first time it happens. They are tied to the Pyromancer Devastator ability trees. Status effects versus resistance, armor, and shield. So, do note here, damaging status effects are anomaly damage based. Therefore, they are moderated by resistance and not by your armor. So when you're on fire, if you're dying from fire, check your anomaly, your resistance stat. Damaging status effects deal normal damage to shields moderated by resistances. So just like every other anomaly damage, status effects play the same rules. How does healing and healing regen interact with other mechanics? The moment that a character hit point reaches 0, the character dies. Okay. The chronological order of incoming damage healing determines if a character will be able to benefit from certain protection effects before hitting 0 hit points. If there is a healing shield regen incoming before the next damage instance, it will be taken into account. Once hit points reach 0, even if a burst of healing immediately follows it, no healing will help the player. Yeah. So once you hit 0, you're dead. Doesn't matter if like a millisecond later you're supposed to get 5,000 healing. That's common sense. Effects applied by the enemy. How do they work? Weakness. Stat effects which reduce the outgoing enemy damage by 33%. So that's interesting. I believe for us it's 25%, unless it changes. This effect can be applied to the player character by enemy attacks. This is news to me. Again, unless I missed something, I believe weakness for players against enemies is 25%. If it's 33%, that's actually quite a bit better than I thought. These effects are used by enemies on high world levels above level 9 and higher challenge tiers above level 4. That's cute. High level challenge tiers above level 4. Come on now. Vulnerability. Status effect that increases damage taken by 15%. This effect can be applied to player characters by enemy attacks. At least this is the same as for us. These effects are used by enemies on a high world tier above level 9 and higher challenge tiers above level 4. Other survivability mechanics. Primary death prevention. This prevents players from dropping below 30% of health due to incoming damage. When triggered, it will block all damage for 1.2 seconds and prevent hit reaction. This mechanic has a 120-second cooldown. This mechanic will only trigger and go into cooldown when a character reaches 30% hit point for the first time while the mechanic is not on cooldown. So this is a secret mechanic. Also, this makes so much sense. Because remember, there's all those mods that say at 30% health something procs. Well, I always thought, well, you can drop below 30 so quickly. How is this going to make sure this works? So this is why they put that in at 30%. So it looks like once you hit 30%, you have a 1.2 second survival period and also allows you to heal back up through like healing methods. So that's new and very important news. If an attack would take a character below 30% hit points, this mechanic effect will only take the character to 30% health. Remaining damage will be discarded. That is huge. That means you could be at 35% health and a broodmother hits you for 1,000,000 damage. I mean, I know it's made up, and you'll only take that 5%. So this makes sense, but remember, it's a 2-minute cooldown. So this is a nice safety net. Now, secondary death prevention. This prevents players from dropping below 10% of health due to incoming damage. When triggered, it will block all damage and hit reactions for 2.1 seconds. It has a 60-second cooldown. So this is also phenomenal to know. So you have 2 emergency barriers here. And this is a quicker cooldown. This mechanic will only trigger and go into cooldown when a character reaches 10% hit point for the first time while the mechanic is not on cooldown. It's basically saying, hey, if you're dying you have two warnings. You get warned at 30% and 10%. So in theory, what could happen if you're being spammed by damage, you hit 30%, you're protected for 1.2 seconds. Once that's up, you get smacked again, you get down to 2 seconds, you have another 2.1 seconds. So really, you have about 3.3 seconds between hitting 30% and getting killed to react. You could roll out, get healed somehow, hit a big cooldown, whatever, maybe. That's the magic number. Mechanic will only trigger, we mentioned that, if an attack would take character below 10%, it'll stop you at 10%, negate all the damage. So again, a Broodmother hits you for 50,000. When you're at 17%, it only drops you down to 10% and you're safe. So secondary death mechanic right there. Spike damage protection. If a single hit takes more than 65% of a player's hit points, the value is limited to just 65%. Okay, this also explains why we're not supposed to be getting one hit ever. So they were talking about the thing where a Broodmother hits on average 50k. So even if you have zero, armor equivalent, or very very little, you're not gonna get hit that hard. You're never supposed to get one shot. And I think there was that bug where they would like calculate two hits like back to back without bypassing some of these death preventions, and that's what was one-shotting people. So this spike protection value increases on high world levels and challenge tiers. It is 65% till challenge tier 9, and then scales to 84.5% by challenge tier 15. Oh, interesting. So, okay, what we really care about, I mean, most people, you're probably not dying on challenge tier, the low challenge tiers, not that much. Most people complaining about being destroyed in the game is at higher tiers, meaning CT 13, 14, and 15. And so what we really care about is this number, 84. I think it was meant to be 0.5, not 5%. So I think most people can ignore the 65% and just realize you can get hit for almost 85% of your health, except for the fact, don't forget, it's going to stop you at 30%. So if this is not on cooldown, the first death prevention, you can only lose 70% of your health. If you're at full health, you get hit again, you can only drop an additional 20%. But then remember, for the minimum next minute, you can be one shot. So it says this means that enemies on higher tiers will be able to deal a higher max damage per individual hit to player before spike damage protection applies. Don't forget, initial damage output of enemies also scales up of each tier that progress through. This is intentional as higher tiers are designed to challenge players to assemble a complete build. That includes adequate protection from damage spikes to resistances, armor, or both. Master enemy behaviors of attack patterns in order to better dodge their abilities and mitigate damage from them. So get good. Get better at playing, get better at dodging, and don't build glass cannons. If you stand in bad, and you don't know game mechanics, and you go glass cannon, don't be upset at the developer that you're dying. Spike damage protection has no cooldown, so it counts for every hit. However, certain boss attacks can be very deadly, regardless of this additional protective mechanic, and should therefore be avoided or dodged whenever possible. In-game example, Chrysalid's breath attack deals multiple hits per swipe. That's big. The Broodmother's Anomaly surge deals damage in quick succession. Hence, people feel like they're getting one shot. They're getting like 2 or 3 shots really, really fast. And this is happening after your primary death prevention and secondary death prevention were down. It'd be nice if there was a visual cue that these were on cooldown, but again, they're supposed to be secret mechanics. All right, so these final 3 mechanics are intentionally hidden in Outriders, as with many other such secret mechanics in-game. So the original vision behind design is to be subtly help the player while also ensuring players do not become reliant on these mechanics when playing the game. Making them too obvious would lead to an over-reliance on these features and under-reliance on the game's focal survivability mechanics, resistance, armor, shield, health regen, skill tree nodes. They didn't really go into health regen that much as far as the calculations, etc. FYI, they just kind of mentioned that it happens. Gear mods, CC abilities, especially at higher difficulties, learning and understanding enemy spawn waves, behaviors, and abilities. Rather, these mechanics were envisioned as subtle ways of preventing players from feeling like they are unfairly killed, while also giving us a player feeling of almost, but not quite being killed in extreme dangerous close call battles. Of course, these mechanics need to be balanced in a certain way. Triggering them too often, too generously, and players end up being effectively immortal. Triggering them not often enough, and the overall design may feel unfair. Given our previous issues around damage mitigation, however, we felt the need to talk about these mechanics more openly, as everyone having a better understanding of them may help explain why some enemies may appear to deal inconsistent damage, e.g., individual attacks appear to deal more or less damage while the death preventions are either active or on cooldown. We feel that a clearer look on the effects of all of these discussion mechanics so far may help to differentiate an issue caused by damage mitigation bugs from the intended difficulty on the game or interactions of effects on the certain builds. Hope to enjoy the first peek under the hood of Outriders systems. We'll be back soon with another one. So I'm really happy they're doing this. This stuff does not need to be hidden. We're not babies. Let us know the mechanics. You know, they don't have to be obvious in game. That's fine if they want to hide it. But let us learn this so we can kind of figure it out. And the people that want to min-max and figure out systems, we can do it. So this last little part is most likely if somebody wanted to skip to the TLDR section. But this is your TLDR for this. Number one, what you need to know. Resistance only protects against anomaly damage and status effects. It caps at 85%. It's a linear progression. Armor damage only prevents physical damage. And it does scale. Your physical damage numbers may scale up and down. And there's no cap on the armor value. But the physical resistance does cap at 85%. Just as resistances do. Shields protect you from both, but how effective your shield is scales off your defense value and your resistance value. Also, the maximum amount of shield you can have is equal to your max health. So higher max health equals higher max shielding. What this means is the ultimate tank, the class that can be more tanky than anybody else, is the Trickster, because they have the built-in shield mechanic. They can get high health, they can get therefore high shielding, high armor, as well as resistance mitigation. On top of it, they have an extra 5% mitigation above all else. So while all other mitigation is capped at 85%, when the shields are up, the shields reduce an additional 5%, meaning effectively they have a 90% mitigation cap for while they have their shields up. When we talk about survival mechanics, you have primary death and secondary death. Basically, the first time you hit 30% damage, all other 30% health, all other damage is ignored. You have a 1.2 second window that you're invulnerable, and then that goes on cooldown for 2 minutes. Then, if you were to hit 10% health, it stops again. You take no further damage below 10%. You're safe for 2.1 seconds. And then that's down for 60 seconds. So effectively, if you were to be hit in rapid succession and hit both of those mechanics, you would have an effective total 3.3 seconds of invulnerability between the two. And then you would have to wait a minimum of 60 seconds for that 10% safety net to come up. And an additional 60 seconds after that for the secondary one, the primary death prevention at 30% to come up. So normally when you're getting one shot or two shot, it's when both of those are on cooldown. Finally, there is spike damage protection, even though they state it's 65%. That's only for lower tiers. Once you're above challenge tier 9, it's going to be in one single attack, assuming your safety measures are on cooldown, meaning you've gone through your first death prevention spike and your second death prevention measures I just mentioned. You can get hit for a maximum of 84.5% of your total health if you have like no resistances and like the minimum possible armor. So those are the big things TLDR in this. And those last mechanics were intentionally meant to be secret, but they're sharing with us. They're going to share more. So hopefully you enjoyed that TLDR if you use the timestamps below. If you enjoyed this content and you want to support me in making more Outrider content, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you want to be notified whenever new videos drop. That being said, again, this is Leeroy from Leeroy Gaming, and I will see you guys in the next video.